Today we're going to talk about two special segments of triangles, and we'll talk about other ones on another day. But today we're going to talk about a mid-segment and a median. Both of those points involve a midpoint, so we have to remember that. Their midpoint is the point that's in the middle of the segment that splits it into two congruent pieces. So first, the mid-segment. A mid-segment connects the midpoints of the sides. It does two things. It connects the midpoints of the two sides of a triangle, and two is parallel to the third side. So what that means is that this is the midpoint of AB, E is the midpoint of AC, and so you can see that those are marked, that they are congruent to each other. And then they are parallel. These two sides are parallel. Now, why that's important is because it brings up all kinds of questions with that involve corresponding angles and alternate interior angles and stuff like that you can use on these kinds of problems, okay? So if each of these, this is a common problem that we would see, this triangle XYZ here, you can see A is the midpoint as it splits XY, B is the midpoint because it splits up XZ, and C is the midpoint because it splits up YZ. So each of these, so this segment, AB, is parallel to YZ. This mid-segment, BC, is parallel to XY. And this mid-segment, AC, is parallel to that XZ. Now, notice that it also, if you take the base, which is the longer side, and so what that is then is that XY, the length of XY, is 2 BCs. It takes 2 BCs, two of those red mid-segments, to make one of those long red segments, because these are, sorry about that, these are congruent. So this one, it takes one of them, and then these are each congruent, so it takes two of them. So it would be 1 YZ is equal to 2 ABs, and then 1 XZ is equal to 2 ACs. So it takes two mid-segments to make one base. So let's look at these questions. In triangle JLK, so in this big triangle right here, MO is 29, ON is 32, and NM is 38. So the question is to find the perimeter of JLK. Well, what we just talked about is that the mid-segment is half as long as the base that it's parallel to, or it takes two mid-segments to make one base. So then that means that this is 38 and this is 38, so that entire side would be 2 times 38, which is 76. So this whole side is 76. Then we have that NO is parallel to JL, and so JL is 2 times 32. So that would be 64, because this is 32 and this is 32. And then we have that MO, which is 29, is parallel to JK. So that means that JK is 29 times 2, which is 58, because this is 29 and this is 29. So to find the perimeter of JLK, which is the big triangle, you would take 58 plus 64 plus 76, and you get 198. So the perimeter of that big triangle is 198. So if you have triangle GHJ, points D, E, and F are the midpoints of the sides. So these two are congruent. These two are congruent to each other. These two are congruent to each other. If DE is 4x plus 5, and GJ, which is this whole thing, is 3x plus 25, what is DE? So in order to do this, we're going to need to solve for x. Well, remember, think about what makes sense. How many DEs does it take to make one GJ? So it takes 2 DEs. So GJ is equal to 2 DE segments. Well, I mean, you can look at that. If you were to pick up that DE, it would go from G to F and then from F to J again. So GJ, which is 3x plus 25, is equal to 2 4x plus 5s. So you can do this one of two ways. You can do 4x plus 5 plus 4x plus 5. I ran out of room. Or you can write it like this. 3x plus 25 is equal to 2 times 4x plus 5. Whichever way makes the most sense to you, but it takes 2 of those 4x plus 5s to make one of those that GJ. So now we have our algebra to do. So 3x plus 25 is equal to 8x plus 10, regardless of whether you set it up 4x plus 5 plus 4x plus 5 or 2 times 4x plus 5. Either way, you end up with the same answer when you combine all your like terms. So now we subtract 3x from both sides. So you get 25 is equal to 5x plus 10. We subtract 10 from both sides. So we get 15 is equal to 5x. Divide both sides by 5. You get that x is equal to 3. So the question, though, says what's DE? So DE is 4 times x, which we just found out x was 3, plus 5. So that's 12 plus 5. So DE is 17, which means GJ is 34 if you had been asked for that. So mid-segments are the segments that go from middle to middle, okay? So a median is similar to a mid-segment, but where a mid-segment goes from midpoint to midpoint, a median goes from the vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. So it extends from the vertex at B, for instance, and then it goes to the middle of the opposite side and splits AC into 2 congruent pieces. So the median always extends from the vertex, and there are actually 3 medians. You have one drawn here, but I could also find the midpoint of BC and connect A. That's a median also. And then I could also find the midpoint of AB and connect it to C. Now, it is interesting. That will always happen. They will always intersect. That point's called the centroid. It's not important for you to remember that, but it's called the centroid. And what's interesting about that is the centroid is the center of gravity. So you could take a triangle, like say it out of cardboard. You could find the midpoints of the sides, connect your vertices, draw your straight lines, and you would be able to balance that triangle on the top, on the point of a pencil. At that point, it's the center of gravity. So that's just an interesting fact that the medians all intersect at what's called the centroid. So let's look at this. The vertex of a triangle have coordinates at 3, 7. Is A. B is at 10, 4. And C is at -2, -4. So I have this triangle here. It says if AG is the median, what are the coordinates of G? So remember that a median extends from the vertex to the opposite side. So it says that AG is the median. So that means it's going to start at A. So it's going to look something like this. It's going to start at A, and it's going to go to the midpoint of BC. So there are 2 ways that you can do this. So one way is to use the midpoint formula. Remember, the midpoint formula was you added the 2 x's and divided by 2, and you added the 2 y's and divided by 2. So if I do that for BC, I want to find the midpoint of BC. Well, B was at, so we've got 10 plus -2 over 2, and we have 4 and -4 over 2. Because it says it starts at A. So since it starts at A, that I don't use A as the midpoint. So 10 plus -2 is 8, and 8 over 2 is 4. and 4 plus negative 4 is 0, and 0 over 2 is 0. So my midpoint is at 4, 0. So there's my midpoint right there. So the coordinates of G is at 4, 0. So this is the answer to the question. Now, I could have also gotten that by looking at it on the grid. So if you look at from C to B, if I want the midpoint, I could have looked at it and kind of seen where the middle was. Okay, I could also have done this. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this side is 12. And this side is 8. So halfway would be over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And up halfway would be up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I could have found the point that way. So you can either count it on the grid, or you can use the midpoint formula to calculate it. But the important thing, the really important thing, is knowing what the median does. It extends from the vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. So this is the actual median that we wanted to draw in. But the question asked it for you to give the midpoint of the side that it's going to go to. So using what we know about a median, it says CM is a median. So as soon as you think median, you need to be thinking midpoint. So then that means that M is the midpoint. So AM is equal to MP. That's what that means. So if AC is 5x plus 6, and AM is 4x plus 7, and MP is 25 minus 2x, what is AC? Well, AC doesn't really have a lot to do with anything right now, but I will need it in a minute. But what is important is that AM is congruent to MP because that line, this line right here, is the median. So it splits AP in half, which means that AM is equal to MP. So that means 4x plus 7 needs to equal 25 minus 2x, and I need to find the x values that allow that to happen. So now I'm going to solve. I'm going to add 2x to both sides so that my x's are on the same side. That gives me 6x plus 7 is equal to 25. Subtract 7 from both sides, so I get 6x is equal to 18. Divide both sides by 6, and you get that x is equal to 3. Okay, but remember, the question says, what is AC? Well, I look, AC is 5 times x plus 6. Well, I just found out that x was 3, so it would be 5 times 3 plus 6, which is 15, plus 6, which is 21. So AC is 21. So the important parts today are, you need to remember what a midpoint is. You need to remember that the mid-segment goes from midpoint to midpoint. The median goes from the vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. But the midpoint is the point that cuts the segment into two